Om Aim Hrim Shrim Vagdevye Saraswatye Namaha. Namaste and welcome. My name is Sarah Singh, and I'm the host of Shakti Talks, where we explore the mystical path of Kundalini awakening. Today we have a special guest with us, Looney, who is my original teacher, who started my entire awakening journey. So I have everything to credit for her. She's incredibly talented, um, energetically just so powerful, so moving. And I remember the first time when I met you in person, Kara. Um, I felt like your voice was like an angel, and I felt like I was in a dream. It was so surreal.
Wow, I love that. That's so funny to hear, that you as a teacher, me as a teacher can have an impact on somebody like that. That's great.
Yeah. So we first crossed paths. I was taking your classes virtually. It was in the midst of the pandemic, right after I had a major trauma. And I wasn't directly in contact with you, but it was through one of the video platforms that you taught on. A collection of 9 classes, all in the time span of 20 to 30 minutes. And I practiced those over and over again for hours on day as I spent this period in solitude healing. And then that's when my awakening started happening. And then I slowly found my way to your website. I think it's caralooney.com. That's correct? Yeah. And from then I started doing your full hour-long classes, and it was so powerful. Things just started purging and coming up, and the healing was just faster than I ever anticipated, like being capable of handling. And you were always such an incredibly strong support, and the community that you built online inspired me to, try to set out and do the very same thing. um and it's just I would love to just hear about your journey of how this started for you, because I know it wasn't always you before had a path and career in law, and things shifted for you. So we could just hear just about your life journey, how you found Kundalini.
Of course. And thanks for inviting me today. It's great to be here. It's great to see you, after the evolution of so many years, space between us since you've become a teacher, and just seeing the evolution of you from the point of your awakening, which I had so much compassion for. You were going through a tough time and then found your way through it. And now you're sharing that experience, strength, and hope as a teacher, which is so powerful. To answer your question, I would have never considered myself a spiritual person. I was raised, though, in a very religious household, very Irish Catholic household, and a lot of fear-based God belief systems that never really resonated with my sister or I. And religion was always sort of a punishment, and sort of just something that just never really resonated with either my sister or I. So we just kind of, after we started having the capacity to make our own decisions as emerging adults, in our adolescent years, we stopped going to church. And I had such a stigma around the word God. When I would hear someone say, "Oh, God bless you," I'd be like, oh, I used to find stuff like that so irritatingly offensive. You know what I mean? Because it triggered so much of that falsity of religion that I had been exposed to. Um, and I started practicing yoga because I was an extremely sort of ambitious athlete with a lot of injuries in my late 20s, early 30s. And I was also working in a law firm that was extremely stressful environment. And so I was recognizing both the cause and effect of a very ambitious athletic um, experience and the stressful environment of a law firm. And so I decided to start practicing yoga. I was like, oh, it's just going to bring some relief to my body and stress relief. And I started with just practicing regular vinyasa classes at gyms, and I really enjoyed it. And I accidentally stepped into a Kundalini class one day. It was like the vinyasa teacher didn't show up, and the only person who was able to step in was the Kundalini teacher. And I had never been into Kundalini before. And I remember my first time in class being so intimidated because there was singing and chanting mantra, and the idea of sharing my voice in public was so kind of triggering for me. And I thought at first, I was like, I don't like this. This is so not for me. And, but there was something that kind of pulled me back to go to her another time. I realized that even though my ego didn't like it, there was something deeper within me that was curious about it. So I showed up again, and something happened to me in that class. Like there was a shift in energy clearing that was undeniable to me. And so then I started practicing Kundalini yoga a lot longer, a lot more often. And this is by that time I had moved from Boston, Massachusetts to Los Angeles, California with my career. And I started practicing for a good year, 2 years, really loving it. Layers of just blocks and beliefs and not me stuff just falling off. And I happened to be in just a regular vinyasa flow class one day, and the teacher was coming around doing savasana and touching people's shoulders to kind of relax them. And all of a sudden, all this energy shot up my spine. And I was having this very cosmic Kundalini awakening. At the time, I didn't know what was happening to me. And I go into detail on that in a couple of videos that I put out on YouTube about my Kundalini awakening. And for a couple of days after that, I was in this very cosmic experience of what I could only define as Christ consciousness. It was just so all encompassing. I had just what felt like access to the whole universe as far as wisdom was concerned. I was plowing through books and just really tapped into a state of connection. And then that frequency, that vibration was hard to sustain, obviously. So I came back down to a more realistic vibration, um, but forever changed. And continued to practice Kundalini awakening, Kundalini yoga, and noticed that the awakening, although it was very punctuated in that one experience, the awakening symptoms lasted 7 years after that. And
Oh
it
my
was
God.
kind of as you've experienced yourself, it was kind of a dark night of my soul.
Yeah.
I had a lot of pain in my body. I had to quit my career because it was just such a toxic environment that it was so visceral in awareness for me that wasn't that way before. And so I resigned from my career. I had left a number of friend groups. I had just changed on a fundamental level in a way that my mind and my ego couldn't keep up with. And it was kind of a traumatizing experience. But there was something very deep within me that knew that this was part of an awakening process, part of a purging, part of an evolution. And what was helpful to me at the time was books. There weren't a lot of other people experiencing Kundalini awakenings at the time I did, around 2013, 2014. Didn't have a lot of resources like there are now out there on
Mhm.
YouTube and things like that. So I turned to a lot of books. Gopi Krishna, Gabriel Cousins put out a few books. I have a bunch of lists on books if you're interested in me sharing those with you. And through that, I started to gain more wisdom and understanding of what I was going through. And it wasn't until about 2020, 2021 that I actually felt grounded in the experience. I moved through a lot of the negative sort of pain and purging and sort of the Kundalini awakening symptoms that were uncomfortable. And I finally felt grounded in the experience of the awakening in a way that allowed me to then be of service to others. Because I think for a lot of times, people who are going through an awakening want to be of service to others, but you haven't fully assimilated. It takes a
Yes.
while, and you don't really know until you've crossed a particular threshold. And you only know that you've crossed that threshold when you have, you know what I mean? And then you're
Mhm.
like, wow, I feel grounded. I feel not only kind of evolved and assimilated into this new energy, but also able to come from a point of experience and expertise to hold space for others in it. And
Mm.
so that's when I started doing all those online classes and teaching about that. And that's kind of right around the time that you found me. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, right around the time that I started to really feel empowered and assimilated in that awakening process.
That's incredible. Oh my gosh. So tell me a little bit about I guess during the process of awakening, something that I hear a lot of people really struggling with is the assimilation and grounding portion of it. So what did you find the most helpful for you in order to sort of overcome that obstacle?
Yoga and meditation,
Mm,
100%. Um, a lot of people try to reclaim their lives the way it was before the awakening. They also, I think what's really important when I say yoga and meditation, that's kind of an obtuse statement. Most specifically, what yoga and meditation bring into the mix is cultivating an identity with the non-dying nature of yourself,
mm,
right? So any other form of physical exercise is like really body focused, right? Spinning and running and all of these things. And you're really focused on the body mechanics and, the result of the body's improvements. What yoga and meditation do is they use the body as a vehicle to access the subtler layers of your being. And if we are so rooted in only the mind and the body, we are not going to be able to effectively move through a Kundalini awakening because it is a spiritual, energetic essence of consciousness. We cannot create a relationship with that through the limited aspects of our being, which is mind and body. We have to learn to cultivate a relationship, an intimacy, and an understanding with our energy, with our consciousness, and with our undying nature. And that's why I say yoga and meditation was key for me, because through meditation I would access heightened states of consciousness that transcended the mind body preoccupation, the egoic preoccupations, the fear of death, all of those things, that gave me a space where I could actually communicate with this energy. Because if you try and like understand this energy through the limited capacities of the mind and body, you're probably going to experience a lot of psychotic, mental, and emotional disruptions, because the two cannot. There's like they don't merge. It's like oil and water, kind
oh
of.
my gosh, that is such a beautiful insight and metaphor. It's so
I'm glad that
true.
resonates, because sometimes I don't know if what I'm saying is actually resonating with other people, and sometimes it takes another person who has awakened to kind of understand how a person who has awakened explains the experience. Um, Sometimes I see a lot of people teaching about Kundalini and Kundalini awakening who've never actually experienced an awakening, but only learn about it through intellectual pursuits. And there's such a miss there. There really needs to be that phenomenological experience. If you're going to educate others on the energy and be of support to another person moving through an awakening, you cannot refer to intellectual pursuits and just texts alone. There has to be some sort of an experience with the energy.
And now that you've developed and like fully assimilated, so how does the your personal practice shift? Because I've noticed for myself, and I've heard this from other people, that their demand or need for personal sadhana, it tends to shift a lot depending on like the energetic needs. Like I know mine, like sometimes energy will be very, very intense, and I'll focus more on just like jap meditation and bhakti based sadhana, and then other times there'll be more space or more freedom, or even in like my personal life in terms of demands to like enhance the energy more and then spend more time with it and allow it to just sort of take over. So what does it look like for you now, like your personal sadhana?
Well, first, I mean, I only think that I've assimilated, right? I feel like I've assimilated, and I assimilated that experience. But who's to say what the energy has in store for me moving forward? If I think
Yeah.
about it, I've been having little introductions to the Kundalini energy my whole life and reflecting back. And that one experience was probably the strongest and most punctuated. And even though I feel like I've assimilated that experience, who's to say with what's going on in the world astrologically, with all the, the cycle of Rudra going on with the sun, with all this, the solar flares, so much energy of awakening coming to us now. So I never say that I'm completed on anything because, you never
Mm,
know. But at least where I am right now, I feel assimilated from that particular experience. And yes, I don't feel necessarily the need to maintain a very rigid practice like I used to. And I wouldn't have even
yeah.
called it rigid. It was like, it was so magnetizing. That's all I ever
Yes.
wanted to do.
Yes.
You know what
Yes.
I mean? It's all I ever wanted to do.
Yeah. It's like a
Um,
magnet. Yeah.
yeah, and then that lightened, and now I find that my sadhana takes so many different forms. My sadhana can be reading a spiritual book on the Pleiadians. You know what I mean? My sadhana can be hosting a 40-day meditation journey focusing on a particular mantra. My sadhana can be inviting people over to gather in spiritual community or teaching a yoga class. So I feel like anytime I'm tapping into that energy, sharing my wisdom that I've connected to on it, I feel like I'm connecting to my sadhana.
That's
Even when I'm out,
beautiful.
even when I'm out in nature, going out
Yeah.
hiking, and oftentimes, before I go out in nature, I will play the Hanuman Chalisa, partially because there's a lot of bears around here, so I'm trying to like pacify, I'm trying to like pacify Mars and like really, um, make sure that nature's got my back, but also to set myself into a spiritual space before I go out into nature. So there is, and I recall, Ram Dass was one of my favorite teachers, Richard Alpert, and I still listen to his recordings today. And I remember him talking about how his sadhana changed. Like he stopped kind of meditating for a period of time and really found that just being in community served to support him and feed him spiritually. So I do feel like it changes over time, and I don't feel that constant pull and need to tap in and like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think where that comes from is the energy itself is encouraging you to step into that space so you can open up a door of facilitation
Oh
so
my
it
gosh.
can move as it needs to. And then once it's kind of moved or assimilated, then that magnetization isn't as strong. That's just an assumption. I don't know.
I mean, that's a really beautiful insight. It really it feels very aligned for like partially of what I've experienced. I'm still in the awakening journey. So, I believe when I met you, and started doing your work live, your incredible classes, that I was always struggling with the heart chakra, and it was Kundalini was stuck there, and it took, I think I've been on heart chakra for like 2 years. Now I'm at the throat chakra, and suddenly it's just everything is just like coming out. Um, and what I feel like has happened is that there's this like long-term need for first internal work, internal purging, and then after that, it's sort of after like there's a certain point of clearing and elevation, then the next stage is like karma yoga, and so then like spreading it, and in itself is a path towards liberation. And so I
Being of
think that
service.
that happens for Kundalini awakening, because ultimately the whole the whole reason why it happens to us is to be of service and not just elevate ourselves and our consciousness, but others around us in the communities that we're within. And so it makes so much sense that you how it's almost it's so unique for everyone, but it's also like a universal sort of formula or path in a way.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Kundalini version of the hero's journey. Because the hero's journey starts, I mean, I guess the hero's journey is kind of like a metaphor, or maybe a metaphor of what's an older uh, folklore is the awakening of Kundalini, which is you come into crisis, you either accept the initiation or don't. And if you don't accept the initiation, then another initiation will come another point in time and probably be a little harsher.
Mm,
If you do accept the initiation, then you're recruited into an evolution. Allies show up, right? Teachers show up, friends
yeah.
show up, opportunities show up. And then if you make it through the crisis, then the last stage of that journey is being of service, is sharing your experience, to help others moving through that. And the beautiful thing is like we can do this on so many different levels once we've awakened, right? I've had people come to my class and actually experience awakening energy. And they're like, I feel like coming to your class, I was able to initiate my Kundalini, whether
Mm,
that's online, whether that's in person. And I don't know whether that's some sort of version of Shakti pot. I'm not sure. I don't intentionally make that happen, but I think the vibration that a person who has already awakened sets, it can be a conduit for somebody who's right on the
yeah.
precipice of awakening.
Yes, and they have to have like a level of clearing and receptivity. But that's definitely happened, and teaching is has especially teaching yoga has always been like a transference of energy. And I absolutely feel like to some degree, that was my experience with you. And even just the power of classes, even online or like virtually, are still just as powerful as in person. And it's
Right.
so incredible, like the transformation that can happen under that.
Yeah. You know, one thing that reminds me about your awakening that I remember Kali showed up as a big figure for you. For
Yeah.
me, it was Ganesh. So when I was in the early parts of my awakening, I was in a meditation and I had this powerful, undeniable vision of Ganesha. And so did another student of mine a couple years later. And for you, in alignment with your experience, it was a little harsher. Like mine was a lot, I guess, I mean, not gentle, but I wouldn't ever call my experience gentle. But I feel like yours was very challenging for you.
Yes.
Even embodying sometimes the expression in as energy was moving through you, you would embody the expression of Kali with the tongue and everything in your eyes. And I mean, I remember I was like, wow, God bless her. Like, look at all of that energy move through her. So I think there's something about a deity representing themselves to an awakening individual and having some sort of a position or a place in that awakening process. And I'm not sure why Ganesha was mine and Kali was yours. I'm sure there's something related to it. I remember looking at your chart and you have all that energy in your eighth house, which if Kali's going to operate any house in astrology, it most certainly would be the eighth house.
Wait, tell me a little more about that. So, because I know you're an incredibly talented Vedic astrologer, and I love doing your reading. It was so shockingly spot on and accurate, but I don't remember what the eighth house was about.
So you have a lot of planets in your eighth house, as I recall.
Okay.
And the eighth house is all about transformation, change, shedding of old skins. And there are a couple placements in a person's house where a Kundalini awakening would show up. Could be in the sixth house, could also be in the eighth house. And so you had all those planets in the eighth. You were going through that extremely challenging Kali awakening. And I was like, oh, yeah, there it is, right there in the eighth house. So there's a lot about Vedic astrology that can assist a person in understanding the nature of their awakening process, their potential for awakening, all of those things.
That's really cool. Wow. And it's so spot on and accurate. So much of what you said in the reading, I remember and I still hold on to this day. I even still have a daily mantra from that you prescribed to me. Like
Oh,
you
wow.
really are like my guru. I mean,
Oh,
the
I love
Shakti
that.
pot, the prescribing of a mantra, like you really are, Kara. So
Well,
I'm
isn't
just
it
so
beautiful
grateful.
too that,
Yeah.
it's kind of like not traditional in the way that you think a teacher would show up for you.
Yes.
I'm not a traditional teacher necessarily. One, if you think back through the history of what it is to be a teacher and a guru, one, I'm a woman. Two, I'm a Western white woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't need to look a certain way. And I think what's really important about people becoming teachers is maintaining their humility and maintaining their integrity.
Mm,
Because you see a lot about people who gain a lot of cities, a lot of powers as a teacher. A lot of charisma starts to come into their field and they start to be magnetic and impactful.
mm,
And if they have not worked on their shadow and really started to heal and do a lot of self reflection, self analysis, those dark points are going to show up as a means through which to kind of sabotage their efforts as being a teacher.
yes.
And you see that all the time, you
Spot
know?
on. Yeah. No, I mean, I've even experienced that with, and like, I thank Callie so much because she definitely guides me to stay very, very humble and just always remember like that the intention behind teaching and like sharing such a spiritual sacred practice, it needs to be so pure and it needs to be sustained. Like it can never be a corrupt thing of like, oh, like ego for followers or like money from memberships. It's like, no, like this is like the heart and essence and intention behind it always has to be to like spread the sacred practice to help others heal for like this very same like motivation of the transformation that it's done for us. And so and that just is so spot on. And I feel like there is like I know we talk and we're like aware of like Yogi Bhajan, like that obviously like his teachings it were so powerful and it's literally to some degree I even have to thank him for like the practices that I have now because without him coming to the West, even if it was, under the intention of to gain a level of power that was used in a corrupt manner, that practice started my entire awakening, and it was also through you as well. And with that being said, when this happens, when we start to grow and evolve and start to magnetize more people, there's this protective energy because it is such a sacred practice. I believe that like the Himalayan masters that they protect it. I'm also like a great devotee of Mahavatar Babaji as well.
Hmm.
And I think that they really try to choose and nurture the people whom they deem as eligible teachers to share the practice and to make sure that they stay on that path and derail or create obstacles or different things to come to reflect if that no longer is the case. So
Yeah.
it's
It's so
really
interesting
interesting.
how polarizing these things can be because the history of yoga as it came into the West and probably even before it came into the West is sort of riddled with a lot of these controversies. Um,
Mm,
and the interesting thing, like even let's use the Yogi Bhajan example because it's the most relevant.
yeah.
You see a lot of stuff out there now completely discrediting the whole body of work because, they would say, everything was made up, it comes from no authentic source. And for me, I never really connected deeply with Yogi Bhajan as a teacher, as a person, but what I could not deny was that the Kriya work did something to and for me, both
Yes.
to elicit the awakening within me before I was even aware of what a Kundalini awakening was, and then secondly, to support the process of awakening and bring it to some level of completion at that particular point or assimilation. And so for me, it's hard for me to discredit and throw the baby out with the bathwater. Yes, he was did all the things that he did, and I'm sure there was some level of what he did that he made up on his own. But I cannot deny the relevance of that work because it profoundly changed my life and so many other people. Um, and that's the interesting thing when we live in an experience of duality. We always assign things as good and bad. This was right and this was wrong, and this was light
Mm,
and this was dark. And when we're practicing this type of work, this is a tantric practice of yoga. Tantra transcends good and bad, right and wrong. It embodies that all of that has purpose in the process of awakening. So our capacity to understand why all that came to pass, why the good came with the bad, why the bad came with the good, is, I think, beyond our capacity to understand. And that's where the faith of the practice and faith of the work comes in. When we're practicing Tantra, everything is unified. Everything that falls in our lap has purpose for our education. Even in understanding the the fall of a teacher. There's something to be learned about that,
mm,
something
yeah.
to be, I guess, valued in that to a degree. It gives us a more refined understanding, both as students and as teachers.
Yes. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
And as a teacher, living in this modern world right now, It's impossible to separate money from teaching. I
Yes.
like to think of money as an energy exchange because it purely is. Money is energy, and it's what you, the mindset, the beliefs, and the energy that you apply to money is what it ends up being for you.
Mm.
And so for me, I do take money for my teachings, but I also maintain a reasonable rate. I see a lot of people really inflating their rates in order to like, because they know they've become very popular and very, very, I don't know, famous as
Mm.
teachers. And so they will raise their rates to kind of meet that. And what that does is it makes yoga accessible only to the elite. Just like healthcare, just like everything else that's
Mm.
happening in society, is that
Yeah.
the benefits of maintaining health and advancing your consciousness become only accessible to those who are wealthy. And that's not the role of a teacher. The role of a teacher is to make the process of awakening available to those who are drawn and magnetized to the work.
And I completely like I really appreciate you bringing up that point and agree with you so strongly. As someone who was in like studio management and one of the top people in selling memberships, I always had this like ethical pull with like my career and vocation and like and just maintaining the pure intention. And at the same time, if you want it to be your vocation and your life's work to be able to be sharing a practice that's going to transform lives, then it is required to. And there are ways to preserve it and keep it pure, I think, as you've really beautifully done. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. And that just we need more people like you in this world, Kara. Just keep producing more Saras.
And I love what you've evolved into. You know, I know you were so vulnerable when you were going through your awakening, and I was like, man, I know what she's going through right now. And you were a lot younger when you went through your experience than when I went through mine. So,
Mm.
it's just that much more challenging, I think, dealing with all the things that a younger person has to deal with. And you moved through it so gracefully. There was so much trust, and there was so much willingness in you to just learn more, engage more, lean into yourself more, trust the energy. You trusted it. And I'll tell you, the way that that energy was moving through you with such a Kali type of embodiment, that would have scared a lot of people who are going through a similar thing,
Mm.
because Kali does have sort of this dark, scary way about her. And if anyone else was going through that, I imagine that they probably would have really wondered about their sanity, because it's one of these things that really comes to question when you're going through the height of awakening. It's like, am I going insane? Am I crazy? Is there something dark moving through me? And you can really go off into some very fearful, anxious, and suspicious states when you're in that space of energy. This is where community comes
Yes.
into a really deep level of importance. And this is where coming into learning from teachers who, like awakened masters, one, right? Learning, reading awakened masters, because they have so much goodness to offer. The frequency of the vibration of their teachings
Mm.
brings so much calm and peace to your soul when you're going through an awakening. And, trusting your instincts when it comes to teachers, because there's a lot more out there nowadays than was when I was awakening, that is um,
Yeah.
that is seeking to exploit and take advantage of a person who's going through an awakening.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and I think it has a lot to do
Yeah.
with people who aren't awakened, that haven't had the energy awakened, and they're like, "Oh, come to my, 2-day, 24-hour course for $7,000 and,
Oh my
get
gosh.
Shakti pot or something like that." And that's where things can become dangerous, because even if that person
Mm.
does have the capacity to bestow Shaktipat, they're not assessing whether the vehicle of their student is primed to receive yet.
Mm.
There does need to be some level of initiation and preparation when it comes to something like that.
Yeah, it does get scary, and I know for myself when I was early on in awakening and certain points where I felt lost, I got scammed a couple times online from people who, they're claiming that they know, oh, you just need this and that, and then, you know, you'll be fine and this will fix it. And it turns out that they didn't know anything, and I just assumed just out of I think I just wanted I really really wanted to have that like formal structure of a guru, and felt like if I had that in my life then I would have a set straight narrow path. And I think that that notion in our minds can be dangerous because we always need to be able to have like the awareness and discernment of who we're following, and know that we always also have to put in the work ourselves, and we can't, just someone snap their fingers and transfer energy into us and then suddenly boom, like it's all done, we didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But I wanted to quickly share about when you're talking about like the scary energy of Kali, how over time it's actually shifted so much where she still comes in scary forms, but now like I see her smiling a lot. I see like the gentle like Parvati side of her, like the maternal energy. And I feel like that is so in sync and harmonious with like the progress that's been made, that there's still this degree of power, but it's no longer so frightening anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm just so grateful for that. Do you still feel a sense of connection with Ganesha? Do you still ever see him and
I
or
don't see him anymore. I haven't
okay.
seen him, but I did get initiated into a Ganesha mantra. I thought that would be really, as a Vedic astrologer, you can
Yeah.
get initiated into various mantras in the mantra shastra. And so the Ganesha mantra as an initiation is the first. And so it was a long process, but I got initiated into that mantra because I thought it seemed appropriate
Mm,
to do so. And it was right around the time that I left Los Angeles and moved to Montana. So it
wow.
felt like a really supportive energy to kind of clear any obstacles out of the path and support the new beginning of this adventure for me. So I still maintain a relationship with Ganesh, most certainly, but I haven't seen any visions. And it really did only happen that one time. But it most certainly felt like an initiation or like a blessing, because I know that Ganesha is the gatekeeper of the Kundalini at the base of the spine.
Mm.
So it did kind of seem like an initiation or some sort of a blessing. So he most certainly, I feel like, is one of my teachers in this process.
That's beautiful, and he's such a happy deity too. Like Kali's
I'm
scary
grateful.
and
I'm
Ganesha's
grateful.
so happy.
But I
But
think
Kali's
the
his mom.
deity that's best for you will show up, right? I think
Yes, and
I
that's the
couldn't
beautiful
imagine
thing.
anyone other than Kali showing up for you. I could not imagine, you know?
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Um, do you have any sort of final last statements that you'd want to share? Any advice for someone who's struggling with awakening?
Yeah. I know a lot of people nowadays, like there's a big awakening going on right now, and it has a lot to do with the shift of ages. It has a lot to do with this cycle of Ruja that we're going through, which is like more plasma, more cosmic energy coming from the sun through these various sun storms and solar storms, and it's just radiating more energy to the planet, waking people up. And so a lot of these people who are waking up aren't necessarily already involved in a practice of yoga or some sort of spiritual sadhana. But my recommendation would be to do that because I think of all the texts that I have read, Kundalini has been a known entity from the beginning of time with humanity. And we've only, over probably, the past 2,000 years or so, collectively probably lost sight of and forgotten about it, mostly because the wisdom and the information has been withheld or inaccessible.
Mm,
Um, and so now there's a coming of age for humanity that's happening right now, where people are actually starting to evolve into their highest capacity of potentiality, which is the awakening of the spiritualized energy. Uh, And so using the tools that are designed to assist, which would be yoga and meditation, excuse me, and finding a style that works for you, right? Not everyone aligns with Kundalini yoga. Not
Yeah.
everyone aligns with vinyasa. Not everyone aligns with bhakti. But I guarantee to everyone out there that there is a style, there is a version of yoga and meditation even that will resonate with you and speak to your spirit. Some people like silent meditation, some people resonate with mantra meditation, but there's something for everyone out there. And I think that is the biggest tool to assist in the process of awakening. So that's what I highly recommend.
That's so well said, and it goes back to the same thing as like with bhakti yoga. Just as there's a different god or deity and a different sort of energy manifestation of the divine for every single different person to follow depending on their makeup and like personal nature. There's also a unique yoga practice for everyone that's also going to be like personally tailored in them. And it's and not Kundalini is definitely not for everyone, but that's the beauty of this journey is many paths, one destination.
And I guess the other thing that I would mention too is that, you were talking about the time that you were really seeking out a guru. But I think, especially at this day and age, I think what we're being recruited to do is find our own personal sovereignty. That's
Mm.
really what the Kundalini energy is awakening within us, is to recognize we don't need to seek outside of ourselves to be empowered,
Yes.
to be whole. That's what it's teaching us. So
Yes.
I think oftentimes like this belief that you need to find a guru and it needs to look a certain way
Mm.
to help you move through that. Like some people say, well, if you're Kundalini awakenings, you need to find a guru. You need to. And I know that's a very traditional mindset about this, but I never really did find a guru. My guru showed up in so many different ways. My guru showed up in
Yes.
books. My guru showed up in my challenges, but really ultimately, and what Kundalini Yoga teaches you, it's all about the inner teacher. Everything that's coming forth from within you and how you perceive it is your teacher. So sovereignty is the name of the game.
So beautiful. It's so well said. Oh my gosh. Every time I hear you speak, I just feel this like this inner glow in my heart and mind because you're just a vehicle. It's just flowing through you. And I just love it.
Thank
But
you. Well, it all feels really logical too to me. It's not anything that's not practical.
yeah.
It may seem very out there and woo-woo to a lot of people, but I love when the practicality and the spirituality can merge together.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to go ahead and end this episode with the chant of Om and three Shantis.
All right, I'll join you. Om and three Shantis?
Yeah.
Okay. You lead, I'll follow.
Oh, perfect. Deep inhale. Om. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.
Shanti. Om.
Thank you so much. Oh,
Thank
it's
you. What a
it's such
pleasure
a
it was hanging out
blessing.
with you.
I know, and I know you have a retreat coming up, so you're welcome to share just in case any viewers are interested in joining.
Sure. We have just a few spots left. I'm going to Mount Shasta, California, April 24th through April 27th. We're going to really connect to the high energy of that environment, do a lot of yoga, meditation, clean eating, connecting to the energy portals of the mountain. So it should be very fun. And we also have a 40-day journey coming up starting this Wednesday, focusing on healing the human DNA, really opening ourselves up to the full recalibration of the DNA structure, which has been compromised over many, many, many generations.
And that one is virtual, so anyone can join that one.
That's
That's
right.
really cool.
That's right.
Awesome.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Bye bye.